Now, the deep state, the mainstream media, the corrupt politician, the invisible enemy, their entire narrative with this election it's starting to slowly fall apart, and people are starting to realize there is election fraud. Remember, in the beginning, what did the mainstream media tell everyone? What is the social media companies telling everyone? There's no such thing as election fraud. It doesn't exist. Well, their narrative is now changing, almost like the riots, where they said the riots were a myth. Those don't exist. These are peaceful protests. Well, now people have been talking. People have been seeing evidence over the internet, on social media platforms. There are public hearings happening now where they're producing evidence. There's multiple lawsuits that are going on in all these different states. And now there is evidence. So their narrative is now shifting, where before they said there's no such thing as election fraud. Now they're saying, well, there is some evidence, but it's not enough to overturn the election. They're losing their narrative. Just like with the riots. Well, there are some people that get out of hand, but the people don't believe the mainstream media. The people are no longer listening to the mainstream media. Because when they see statistical numbers, when they see actual facts, they see the truth, they realize this can't be true. I mean, take for example, where Joe Biden, he delivered a Thanksgiving Day teleprompter message. Now, he supposedly got 80 million votes, right? Everyone was with him, even though he had rallies that, got up to 15 people? They had about 10 circles, and he mostly stayed in his basement. So out of the 80 million votes, because people are so in love with him, he received 1,000 people to watch his statement live. Does that make any sense whatsoever? 1,000 people out of 80 million votes? Wouldn't the 80 million people want to hear what he has to say? Because it's so important, because he's the fake president-elect? This shows you right there, and actually Trump tweeted this out. Report, Biden's Thanksgiving Day address gets just 1,000 views online, a record low. Observers say a candidate with 80 million votes would get many more online viewers. Numbers don't lie or add up. And he's absolutely right. Numbers do not lie. And we're starting to see there's a lot more evidence pouring out in regards to election fraud. The Pennsylvania state legislature, remember, they held a hearing right before Thanksgiving on Wednesday, and we had plenty of witnesses that were pointing out irregularities. And a very credible witness described how he personally observed dozens of USB cards being uploaded to voting machines, which resulted in 50,000 votes for Joe Biden in a short period of time. And who is this witness? His name was Gregory Strenstrom. He says, I'm from Delaware County, a former commanding officer in the Navy, veteran of foreign affairs, CEO of my own private company, a data scientist and a forensic computer scientist, and an expert in security and fraud. I was told that every election, they leave a couple of USBs in the voting machines. After talking to law enforcement, I found out that that was not the case, that more than 2 USBs is unusual. So they denied they did it, but as of today, 47 USB cards are missing and they're nowhere to be found. So I was told personally that these cards that were uploaded, they didn't update the vote live in real time. He continued, the only uploaded about once every 2 to 3 hours. I demanded they updated the vote so I could see what the result was, and it was 50,000 votes. And as a computer scientist, an American and a patriot, it doesn't matter who those 50,000 votes were for. I'll tell you, they were for Biden. But That was shocking to me as an American. And someone has gone to war, that could even happen. So when he looked at this, he said, we have major problems here. And in all cases, the chain of custody was completely broken. Take a listen to what he said.
He said, well, we've got all the forensic records and so forth. We just learned 2 days ago that virtually all chain of custody logs, records, yellow sheets, everything was gone. All forensic evidence, all custody sheets in Delaware County are gone. They had a signing party where they sat down and poll workers were invited back to recreate those logs. And our understanding as of today was that they were unsuccessful in getting them all. So we have a situation where we have 100,000 ballots to 120,000 ballots, both mail-in and USB, that are in question. Now, there's no cure for this. There's no remedy for this. As a home charter, we could have a re-election in Delaware County for our own representatives within our own town, but there is no cure for that for the President of the United States.
So now with these public hearings, people are listening to these witnesses, they're listening to these different cases, and they're starting to realize these things sound strange. They're irregularities. Now, of course, the mainstream media is trying to block all of this, pretending that it really doesn't exist, but people always find a way. And this is what the mainstream media, the deep state, the invisible enemy doesn't understand. When you hide things from the people seek them out because they want to know the truth. Once they wake up and they start to ask questions, they want to know more. And when you want to know more, you actually go out and you look for it. You don't wait for the mainstream media to tell you, because you no longer believe what they're telling you, so you go to other places to find these things out. Now, what's very interesting is that we know that Trump, his legal team, and many other individuals, they have lawsuits. And a new lawsuit was filed in the state of Georgia by Trump's legal team. This is separate from Sidney Powell, and this affects thousands of illegal votes. So Trump's attorney, Philip Klein, announced a new Georgia lawsuit, and they filed it. The Armistead Project, a part of the Thomas More Society, filed a lawsuit contesting Georgia's results, citing expert opinion that well over 100,000 illegal votes were improperly counted, while tens of thousands of illegal votes were not counted. And we're seeing these lawsuits all over the place. Yes, Sidney Powell is one of them, Trump's legal team, and there are many other private lawsuits that are happening now. The people are suing because they don't believe what happened in the elections. Trump tweeted this out. Wow. Twitter bans highly respected Pennsylvania State Senator Doug Mastriano after he did a great job of leading a hearing on the 2020 election fraud. They and the fake news work together, want to silence the truth, and silence the truth is in all caps. Can't let that happen. This is what the communist countries do. And he's absolutely right. This is what the communist countries do. They censor people. Why would you censor a state senator of Pennsylvania that was holding a hearing where they wanted to get to the bottom of the election? Was it fraud? Were there irregularities? What was the problem? Because they've been telling us, and this is coming from Hillary Clinton, Obama, that our voices matter. They count. You want to be heard. Well, the only way to be heard is if your vote is counted. It's legal. If someone's manipulating the elections, doesn't matter which side, you're no longer heard. So why would they be censoring? Because it has nothing to do with that. They already knew they were going to manipulate and cheat. They just made it seem really good when they're out there. Remember, they say one thing and then their actions do something completely different. Now, attorney Sidney Powell, she filed a 104-page bombshell complaint of massive fraud in the 2020 Georgia election, and attorney Abigail Fry posted the following. The Kraken came down to Georgia on this Thanksgiving Eve in the form of a 104-page bombshell complaint exposing the massive fraud that overwhelmed the 2020 Georgia elections. Georgia, you are the most certainly on our minds. Link to filing to come. So they link to the filing, and there's a lot of pages here, but I'm going to read some of them here. This is on page 3. The filing of the purpose of the fraud is stated to make certain Joe Biden won the 2020 election. And it says, the scheme and artifice to defraud was the purpose of illegally and fraudulently manipulating the vote count to make certain the election of Joe Biden as president of the United States. The fraud was executed by many means, but the most fundamentally troubling, insidious, and egregious is the systematic adaptation of an old-fashioned ballot stuffing. It has now been amplified and rendered virtually invisible by computer software creating and run by domestic and foreign actors for that very purpose. Mathematical and statistical anomalies rising to the level of impossibilities, as shown by affidavits of multiple witnesses, documentation, and expert testimony, evince this scheme across the state of Georgia. Let me read page 8 of the filing where the bombshell is. Specifically, video from the State Farm Arena in Fulton County shows that on November 3rd, after the polls closed, election workers falsely claimed a water leak required the facility to close. All poll workers and challengers were evacuated for several hours at about 10 p.m. However, several election workers remained unsupervised and unchallenged, working at the computers for the voting tabulation machines until 1 a.m. And we know from the text messages, we know from the work orders, there was no water main break. This was a scheme to get the people out of the room so they could do their dirty work. And we could see that they have video of this. This is powerful stuff right here. And we see that people want to boycott the Georgia elections. And Trump, he is saying no. He's saying the 2020 election was a total scam. We won by a lot and will hopefully turn over the fraudulent results. But we must get out and help David and Kelly, two great people. Otherwise, we are playing right into the hands of some very sick people. I will be in Georgia on Saturday. He's, holding a rally there? Of course. There's another election going on. And by the way, they're going to be using the same exact Dominion systems to run this next election. These systems should be confiscated so nothing can be overwritten. They shouldn't be used again in another election if there are irregularities. And there's a lot of lawsuits going on, especially from Linwood and others, where I believe these machines should be impounded. So they shouldn't be used in this election that's coming up. Now, we're seeing a lot of other anomalies all over the country in many different states. It's not just Georgia. It's not just Pennsylvania. We know it's Michigan and many others. But in Michigan, Kyle Becker tweeted this out. Biden achieved 97% of all additional new votes above 2016 election total and achieved 151% more new votes than new registrations. These statistical anomalies would keep political scientists up at night if it were against any president not named Trump. And he's absolutely right. And he underlined a certain section here. General election, the Republican county in the 2016 general election showed Biden gained 3.2 new voters to every one new voter for Trump. Down below, it also says, in all, I identified some 40,771 votes as a statistically anomalous in Wayne County and some 46,125 votes in Oakland County. And when we start to look at all these different areas, none of this makes sense. And this is how you know there was fraud. Remember, the BBC, way back, and we read this, they gave a listing of how you can tell an election was manipulated, where you have a pause in the election, and then all of a sudden new votes come in. The statistics, they don't match up. The turnout is like 90%. All of this is happening right now. And we can see that another case citing Dominion, and this is section 13 of this document, it says, the final red flag is perhaps the greatest. Something occurred in Michigan that is physically impossible, indicating the results were manipulated on election night within the EMS. The event, as reflected in the data, are the 4 spikes totaling 384,000 ballots, allegedly possessed in a combined interval of only 2 hours and 38 minutes. This is physically impossible given the equipment available at the 4 referenced locations. We look at ballots processed and cross-reference the serial numbers and types of scanning devices used at each location to determine the amount of ballot processing capacity per the equipment performance specifications. The model DRM 16011 processes 60 images per minute without accounting for paper jams, replacement cover sheets, or loading time. So we calculate 2,000 ballots an hour, machine and field conditions, which is probably generous. This calculation yields a sum of 94,867 ballots as the maximum number of ballots that could be processed. It should be noted that in the event of a jam and the counter is not reset, the ballots can be run through again, effectively duplicating them. This was noted in Ms. Caron's affidavit. A Dominion contract employee working in Detroit, the existence of the spike is indicative of a manual adjustment either by the operator of the system or an attack by outside actors. In any event, there were 289,866 more ballots processed in the time available for processing in 4 precincts townships than there was processing capacity. So how is that possible? It isn't. It's completely impossible. And when you start to look at all of this, you can see that people are not buying this anymore, because as more and more evidence comes out, as more and more people see this, as more and more people have questions, because when you think logically, things just don't make sense. And actually, Trump wanted us to look at this article at the Federalist, and this is what he tweeted out. A must-read, impossible for Biden to have overcome these and even greater odds. And this is from the Federalist, and this is the headline. 5 more ways Joe Biden magically outperformed election norms. And they go through this entire article. I'll read parts of it. 80 million votes. A lot of Americans turn out for a Washington politician who's been in office for nearly 50 years. Consider this. No incumbent president in nearly a century and a half has gained votes in a re-election campaign and still lost. President Trump gained more than 10 million votes since his 2016 victory, but Biden's appeal was so substantial that it overcame President Trump's record support among minority voters. Biden also shattered Barack Obama's own popular vote totals, really calling into question whether it was not perhaps Biden who pulled Obama across the finish line in 2008-2012. Number 2, winning despite losing most bellwether counties. Biden is set to become the first president in 60 years to lose the states of Ohio and Florida on his way to election. For a century, these states have consistently predicted the national outcome, and they've been considered roughly a representative of the American melting pot as a whole. Despite national polling giving Biden a lead in both states, he lost Ohio by 8 points and Florida by more than 3. For Biden to lose these key bellwethers by notable margins and still win the national election is newsworthy. Not since the mafia alleged aided John F. Kennedy in winning Illinois over Richard Nixon in the 60s has an American president pulled off this neat trick. Even more unbelievably, Biden is on his way to winning the White House after having lost almost every historic bellwether county across the country. The Wall Street Journal and the Epoch Times independently analyzed the results of 19 counties around the United States that have nearly perfect presidential voting records over the last 40 years. President Trump won every single bellwether county except Clallam County in Washington. That's it. Does this make any sense? No, it doesn't. This is why people are starting to question it. This is why the mainstream media is out there saying, okay, there is some evidence, but it's not enough to overturn the elections. But we can see that they're projecting right now because they understand this narrative that they've been trying to control is going to completely fall apart. Now, Jenna Ellis, she tweeted this out, laugh out loud, Dems panicking and saying this wasn't a real hearing in Pennsylvania. Sorry, Libs, Article 2 is very real. What did she just say? She said from this point on, they're going to be using Article 2. This is what we laid out way back when the elections were first called by the mainstream media for Joe Biden. I do believe that Trump, he's already signaled this, so did Pompeo, they will be following the Constitution. So what is the strategy of Trump? They're holding public hearings in front of the legislators. All the states where Biden cheated. They're exposing the fraud. They're letting people see that there are problems. They're questioning it. And then they're going to use Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution. What does that state? Each state shall appoint in such a manner as the legislator thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress, but no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. The legislators, they're going to ignore the popular vote because when they hear election fraud, when they see the irregularities, when they see the manipulation, when they see that there was no oversight, this is going to be a problem. They're going to see that this election was rigged. The votes were manipulated. The state legislators will choose pro-Trump electors moving forward. And I do believe this is what Trump is planning. Yes, his cases are going to move up to the state Supreme Court, then all the way up to the Supreme Court. Robert Barnes tweeted this out. When Barack Obama challenged whether signatures matched, guess what the average rejection rate was? 62%. Trump only needs a rejection rate of 1 to 2% for election results not to be certified for Biden. This is not working out for Biden, the deep state. Why do you think they have a backup plan? Why do you think they're going to have a tantrum when all this starts to come out? Trump tweeted this out. Biden can only enter the White House as president if he can prove that this ridiculous 80 million votes were not fraudulently or illegally obtained. When you see what happened in Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee, massive voter fraud. He's got a big unsolvable problem. And he does. The deep state right now, they're panicking. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about this a little bit later. But first, I wanted to talk about how they're panicking over Flynn. Because what did Trump just do? He pardoned Flynn. Now, Elizabeth Warren is out there, and she's saying that Donald Trump is the most corrupt president in American history. She's panicking. Schiff is panicking. Brennan is panicking. Who knows where all the bodies are buried? Flynn, he's free now. Then we have Andrew Weissman, the brains behind the Mueller investigation. It wasn't Mueller. It was Andrew Weissman. This is what he tweeted out. Trump's abuse of pardon power undermines the crown jewel of our democracy, the rule of law. Well, Technofog decided to respond to Andrew Weissman, and this is what he wrote. Weissman protests because the Flynn case implicates the corrupt special counsel. They didn't prosecute Flynn because they thought he was guilty. FBI agents didn't think Flynn lied. Team Mueller went after Flynn so they could build an obstruction case against Trump. Corrupt motive. And they tried to keep him quiet because they knew, he knew, and they didn't want him speaking. This is why Sullivan just sat on the case. He did nothing. But when you read the actual statement that Trump put out about General Flynn, what does it say? Well, the proclamation just didn't pardon him. It declared him innocent. Now that's huge. So he is innocent and pardoned because the corrupt system would not drop the case. They had no evidence. There were no prosecutors. The Justice Department had nothing. And they pleaded with the judge and told him, there's nothing here. Actually, the evidence shows that he is innocent. It shows that he did nothing. But Sullivan, he had his instructions. He followed the instructions from Obama. Keep the case stalled. Make sure that Flynn can't speak. Well, Trump just countered that. We'll be talking a little bit more about the plan a little bit later. But it seems that the social media companies, as they lose the narrative, they're going to be getting prepared for censorship. And it seems that Trump is preparing the groundwork, letting us know that this is coming. This is what he tweeted out. Twitter is sending out totally false trends that have absolutely nothing to do with what is really trending in the world. They make it up and only negative stuff. Same thing will happen to Twitter as it happened to Fox News Daytime. Also, big conservative discrimination. He continued, big tech and fake news media have partnered to suppress freedom of the press is gone, a thing of the past. That's why they refuse to report the real facts and figures of the 2020 election, or even, where's Hunter? It's funny how he says, where's Hunter? Then he continued with this tweet. For purposes of national security, Section 230 must be immediately terminated. Think about what social media is doing right now. They are acting as a publisher. They are censoring or removing accounts. They are putting labels saying that, no, this is wrong, we're right. And people actually are not even paying attention anymore because a lot of their official fact checks are coming from where? The mainstream media. And no one believes them anymore. No one's even paying attention to the labels because as you continually see the labels, you get used to them and pretty soon you don't even see them anymore. You don't even click on them anymore. This whole thing is not working. And they know it. So what's their alternative? Shutdown. Censorship. Now what's very interesting is that Attorney General Bill Barr, he made a surprise visit to Chicago last week. Now, a lot of people are wondering where Bill Barr is. Well, I think for optics, I don't think Bill Barr is going to get involved right now. Why? Because the people are pushing the cases. Sidney Powell is pushing the case. Trump's legal team is pushing the case. I think Bill Barr will come into play a little bit later. But the question is, why was he in Chicago last week? What was he doing there? That's an interesting question. Now, it seems that the deep state, they are trying to push some type of an event. Remember, Trump, he's been establishing peace throughout the Middle East. Israel is making peace with many of the countries there. And it seems that the head of Iran's nuclear program was assassinated east of Tehran. Now, Iran has come out and said it was Israel. Do you think the deep state would like a war right now? Do you think they're setting up a false flag? Because think about it. Trump has been laying out his peace plan in the Middle East. Israel's been making peace with many of the nations in the Middle East. This would be a perfect opportunity to try to switch everything up and start some type of war. Do you think this is going to work? No. Do I think the deep state decided to do some wet work to try to push this along? Yeah, I think they did this now, and I think they did it with Khashoggi way back because they wanted Trump to do something. And he never followed along with what they wanted. And they got very angry and they got pissed off because he doesn't listen to what they want. He doesn't follow along in what they want. He understands what they're trying to do. He understands the false flags. He understands everything that they're doing. He knows their playbook. He has the intelligence. Now, what's very interesting is that Trump, he decided to send a message to the deep state in China. So he tweeted out, and I think Dan Scavino tweeted this out first, a military jet flying in the air. And Trump tweeted out all newly rebuilt military. Remember what the deep state was trying to do? Remember the secrets that Clinton was selling? I think he just told them, we've taken all those parts and everything that you've done where you think you have us. They've been swapped out. The military's newly rebuilt, and you can no longer control our aircrafts. You can't drop them out of the sky. So everything that you received from Clinton and others, it will not work. And I do believe he's just sent that message to them. Now, what's very interesting is that we know that there are certain governors, because of COVID, they've been very, very strict, locking down, actually violating people's constitutional rights. And it seems that out in New York, Governor Cuomo, de Blasio, they've been shutting down religious ceremonies. And we see that the Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn, the Orthodox Jewish group, they got together and they sued Cuomo. And the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that yes, they can hold religious services. And it seems this is a major win for religious freedom. Now, I don't know why we had to go to court. It's already specified in the First Amendment. And we don't have to go to court to say, hey, let's enforce the First Amendment. The First Amendment's there. The Constitution is not suspended during a pandemic. There was really no reason to do this. And all the religious leaders should have gotten up, stood up across the state and say, no, you can't do this. Look at the Constitution. It's not suspended. But once again, we can see that the deep state, they like to push. This is what Trump, the Patriots, are allowing people to see. This is their world. This is what they would like. And if we allowed it, we would be in their world. But we can see the people are waking up and they don't want to be in that world. Now, Trump, he just went ahead and started to drain the swamp quite a bit here. And we can see that he's starting to shift everything very, very quickly. So the Trump administration removed globalists and war hawks from the Defense Policy Board, including Madeleine Albright, Henry Kissinger, Jane Harman, and Eric Cantor. He's moving at lightning speed now. He knows he's going to be reelected. He knows this is the time. His second term, he's going to go out and he's going to hunt all these people down. Remember, Madame Albright is famous for bribing the North Korean dictator with U.S. cash in a failed peace agreement. She has also famously argued that killing 500,000 Iraqi children was a good foreign policy move. And he's getting rid of all these people. Remember, he kept certain individuals for optic purposes. Because why allow your enemy to be far away when you can keep them close and watch what they're doing? You can monitor them. Now, with everything with the election, we see that the tide is now turning. And Molly McCann, she put this out. She put this article out here, and she wrote, "The tide is turning." Pennsylvania GOP members of the Pennsylvania legislature held a very lengthy hearing in a hotel in Gettysburg, which we know. This is the start. Multiple witnesses testified to election fraud and illegality. Now, the benefit of this hearing is twofold. First, it starts to get the evidence of fraud out to the American people. Americans need to hear what actually happened in this election. A demand for election integrity has to grow in volume. A national outrage builds. Our chances of pulling this win back will increase. Second, the hearing begins to prime the legislator to act if necessary. It is the legislator's duty in Pennsylvania and around the country to guard against cabal, intrigue, and corruption in the selection of the President of the United States. If there was intrigue and corruption at play in these various states, as the evidence strongly suggests there was, and the vote of the people has been tainted beyond repair, it is the duty of the legislators to step in and choose their own electors. And in Michigan, Constantino is the case brought by private plaintiffs that sought, among other things, to enjoin the Wayne County certification to undertake a results audit of the election pursuant to a relatively new constitutional amendment in Michigan that allows voters to request an audit. Since the suit was filed, though, the Wayne County Board certified the election results. First, they didn't certify, then they did certify, and finally, the Republicans tried to rescind their votes to certify. Michigan, however, is moving forward, assuming the rescission is null. The Michigan Supreme Court refused to hear the appeal from the denial of the injunction, but it wasn't a sweeping or final denial. The plaintiffs will still be able to fight for their audit, and the court retained jurisdiction to expedite the appeal. There are a few important points here. First, the concurrence and dissent both noted that the disturbing evidence of fraud that was brought forward by this suit. That's very good. It's good to hear a court worry out loud on the record, and it sends the signals to the legislator to perk up and pay attention. Second, the concurrence made much of the fact that despite the division over the election, the people of Michigan democratically passed this constitutional amendment 2 years ago, and the transparency and process it provides are obviously something the people of Michigan value and want. The Michigan Supreme Court is currently majority Republican. Now, this is going to change in January of 2021, January 1st to be exact. So time is of the essence. In Wisconsin, there is an ongoing recount happening in Milwaukee and Dane counties in Wisconsin. And we're hearing positive reports that suggest Republicans are getting a chance to step in and challenge a lot of the votes. But at the end of the day, I think Wisconsin can probably only be dealt with via a lawsuit over the illegal votes. And Trump is probably looking to expedite a suit once the recount is complete. In Georgia, we know that Sidney Powell, she dropped her first suit right before Thanksgiving. This is just the beginning. Now remember, the certification is procedural. And yes, the past, they were reversed. In 1960, it appeared that Richard Nixon had won Hawaii by approximately 115 votes. The state certified the election for Nixon. The governor affixed his signature, and off the results went. A recount that dragged on to late December ended with a new result. Kennedy won. The state certified the election results a second time, but for Kennedy. The governor affixed his signature, and off the second results went to Congress. Congress accepted the second certification for Kennedy. So just because these individuals are certifying something, it doesn't mean it's all said and done. Actually, they're implicating themselves in fraud, showing that they were complicit. Sidney Powell responded to what Molly McCann had to say, and she said, answer, yes, but actually, it was always a tsunami in favor of Trump. The evil media, big tech, left conspired to make the American people believe otherwise to cover their massive fraud. Now, it seems that Pennsylvania, that court in Pennsylvania, the federal court, just shut down Trump's case. Not a real big deal anyhow. Where is Trump going to bring all these cases? Yes, through the rule of law, you start at the lower courts, you move your way up. Where is he going next? He's going to the Supreme Court. Jenna Ellis tweeted this out. Rudy Giuliani and me on Third Circuit's opinion. The activist judicial machinery in Pennsylvania continues to cover up the allegation of massive fraud. We are very thankful to have had the opportunity to present proof of the facts to the Pennsylvania state legislature, on to SCOTUS. And this is where all these things are going to end up going, most of them, all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, Blueprint Q tweeted this out. Election executive order equals national security. Cyber command activated. DOD unexpectedly realigned. Election fraud occurs. Historic SOF realignment leaks CIA swamp eliminated. Keystone, Pennsylvania revealed, plus Georgia and Michigan. Fraud and foreign backdoor forensically evidenced. DOD policy board cleaned out. It seems that Trump has been setting everything up. And what's very interesting is that Dan Scavino, he tweeted out this video of a lion. And it seems that this is John Voight who is narrating this. Listen to a small portion of this, because this, I do believe, explains Trump's strategy.
They're barking at him, laughing at him. They nip his toes and eat the food that's in his domain. They do this, and they get closer and closer and bolder, until one day, that lion gets up and tears the shit out of everybody, runs like the wind, eats everything in his path. Because every once in a while, the lion has to show the jackals who he is.
Now, as you can see from this video, we have all the jackals surrounding the lion, nipping, biting. And once the lion decides, I've had enough, these jackals have crossed the line attacks. The hunters have become the hunted, and everything is starting to turn around now in favor of Trump. This was the plan, to expose their entire system to the country, to the world. Because how do you move forward if their system is in place? Trump responded to this tweet that Dan Scavino put out. So much truth, confirming he is the lion. And I want to go back to post 970. This is March 27, 2018. And Anon on the board said, Free Flynn. Down below it says, done in 30. House cleaning. White House secured. final stage. So Flynn has been freed. 30 days until Christmas? We'll have to see what happens. But it seems that Trump, he is cleaning house. They've been securing the White House. And it seems that we're at the final stage of all of this with the elections. Does this mean it's over with the deep state? No, it just means that this phase is over, because we know what's going to happen once they realize Joe Biden is not the president-elect. And when the world, the country, starts to hear that Trump is the president, this is where the deep state moves in a completely different direction. This is when they throw their tantrum. But again, Trump, the Patriots, they've known this from the beginning. They know their playbook. Actually, this is going according to plan. This is what Trump and the Patriots, this is what they needed to do to show people that the elections were rigged. They've been manipulated for a very long time. You never had a voice. We're returning that voice to the people. We're exposing the fraud. We're exposing the manipulation. We're exposing the crimes. And it's all going to come out. And people are going to understand. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, because we all live in America. We all have the right to choose our leader. The invisible enemy, the deep state, they don't have a right to take that away from us and to make us think that we have a voice still, even though they're controlling us. What Trump, the Patriots are doing, they're showing everyone the illusion that we've been living in. And once that illusion is broken, they can't go back to it. It's going to be very, very difficult. They know this, and this is why the deep state, mainstream media, this is why they're prepared. They're going to be shifting their narrative. And they're going to attempt a coup. They're going to push very hard. This is why all the pieces are in place. This is why Trump understands what they're about to do. He understands the playbook. Remember, we have to go back to the beginning to understand the end. When can you federalize the National Guard? When can the National Guard work with the Marines? Well, when there's insurrection. Trump, the Patriots, they understand this. Everything is in place. The Patriots are in control.